Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to everybody who is joining us live in the Ayurveda Soul Sister Tribe and Women's Health Facebook group. Appreciate you all being here with us today, and welcome back to all of our podcast listeners. Today we are talking about a very important women's health topic, and that's the best way to exercise for hormone health. And I have the lovely Eden here with me, who is going to be sharing her wisdom about exercising for hormonal health. So Eden has a Bachelor of Science in nursing. She has over 500 hours of yoga teacher training, and she is a certified integrative nutrition coach. As the founder of her personal brand and company, Sincerely Eden, she uses her diverse knowledge to help women harness their ability to live a comfortable, confident, and symptom-free life each and every day of their cycle. By focusing on not just diet and exercise, but all determinants of health, she's able to pinpoint where stress and imbalances stem from and bring her clients into equilibrium using an upstream approach. Her programs offer a mixture of conventional, holistic, and spiritual solutions to help women achieve an optimal health and, most importantly, maintain balance in their lives. But when she is not busy doing her work, when she's not working, when she's not nursing and with clients, she is hosting in-person and online events, but she loves to move her body, which is fantastic because that's why we're here to talk about movement for hormones. And she also loves traveling with her partner in their van. Mm-hmm. So welcome, Eden.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And I'm excited to be here. This is my first live event. So thank you so much for sharing me on this podcast.
You're welcome. So have you newly built out a van to travel around in, or is it something you've had for a while?
We've had it for a couple of years now. The weather in the summer, obviously, as you know, if you're in Australia on the east side, we've had a lot of rain. So we haven't used it as much as we like to lately. But yeah, we've had it a couple of years, and it's so fun to just go away even for a couple nights and get out in nature, you know.
Yeah, I bet. A good sense of freedom. Get out in the elements. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Well, I always start off by asking my guests some rapid inspiration questions. And the first one is, can you inspire us with what your superpower is?
So I had a little think about this one, and I would say that I can fall asleep anywhere. And I see that as a superpower because so many people struggle with sleep problems, and I have in the past as well. And yeah, I've really built a really healthy routine around sleep. And I feel like it doesn't matter where I am, I'm able to get a really good quality sleep. And so I see that as a superpower these days.
Absolutely. And so many people are going to be jealous of that superpower, especially as a nurse, like doing shift work. Sleep is so important, but so difficult because your whole circadian rhythm has been thrown out of balance just purely from doing different shift work and not being able to apply dinacharya, which is Ayurveda for daily routine, to help you balance your natural circadian rhythm. So that is amazing that as a nurse, you have great sleep.
Yeah, it's taken a lot of trial and error and body awareness, but I'm very grateful for that superpower of mine these days.
100%. And I love that superpower, and no one has said that yet. So
amazing.
What's your favorite quote or mantra at the moment?
So a couple months ago, I went on a silent, technology-free 10-day meditation retreat, and the theme of the retreat that kept coming up was nothing is permanent and everything is impermanent. And so that is something that I live by and remind myself time and time again, especially in uncomfortable situations, or if I'm feeling anxious or anything. I just remind myself, this is impermanent, everything passes. And it does go for the good things too. And it's just important not to be attaching so much to the good things in life that when those things eventually fade away, we don't feel a lack in those situations, if that makes sense. So That's something I really live by day in and day out since doing that meditation retreat. And it's really helped me.
Beautiful. That 100% makes sense. And that alone could be a beautiful podcast episode. So maybe I'll get you back to chat about that. Was it a Vipassana retreat?
Yes, it was Vipassana. Amazing.
Amazing. And what or who is inspiring you at the moment?
So I would say my clients. Every time I jump on a call with them, and I usually talk with them every 2 weeks. So within that 2-week period, they've been able to implement things that I've recommended to them. And I just find their drive and motivation is so inspiring, and it really helps lift me up and inspire me to continue on with these practices, because I'm human as well. And sometimes it can be hard some days over others, especially when we factor in our hormones. And so just having those chats with my clients regularly and seeing how they continue to just grow and grow is super inspiring for me. So I would say my clients.
Beautiful. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your story, about yourself. And in particular, your story with hormonal imbalances and why you decided to help other women who are going through the same.
Yeah. So as a lot of young teenage girls do, I was put on the hormonal birth control pill, and it wasn't even technically by choice. My parents knew I was being sexually active at that time, and they really pushed it onto me to take it because that's obviously all they were taught as well back then. Especially there wasn't this much knowledge around side effects and all of that, and it was very normalized. So I went on the pill from 16 till 18, and my partner and I broke up, and because I never had really wanted to take it, I decided to go off it and give my body a break. But I didn't actually have the knowledge about what it was doing to me. I just knew intuitively that it didn't feel right to take it. And I had never, prior to that point, struggled with skin issues. And it wasn't until I went off the pill that I started to break out all over my face in really bad cystic hormonal acne. And I was like, what is this? And as you do, you go to the doctor and the dermatologist. And unfortunately, the only options they gave me at the time was to go back on the pill and or take antibiotics. So I did both, which, as you can imagine, really disturbed my gut health and obviously was just putting a Band-Aid on the situation. And still intuitively, I couldn't explain why, but didn't feel good about that decision. But again, I wanted my acne to go away, as we all would. So I went that route. Fast forward a couple more years, and during that period, I really started to dive into holistic health, and it was more just a passion of mine. I was a nursing student at this time, but I really did see the benefit of holistic health and looking at health in a really well-rounded way. And I wanted to get to the root cause of some of my symptoms. So I actually went plant-based at this time, and I started to just really clean my diet up, really invite movement into my life, and I felt I was quite a healthy person. So I was like, it'll be safe to go off the pill. I shouldn't have any skin issues. And my skin, I wouldn't say was as bad as it was the first time I went off, but the acne did still come back, even though my lifestyle was a lot better. And I also didn't get a period for 10 years after going off the pill the second time. So that was a huge eye-opener to me on just how, one, sensitive I am personally. Not everyone has the same experience, but two, just how out of whack a little pill that we weren't really taught much about side effects wise can really throw off your body system. And so that propelled me to want to research a little bit more on my own and figure out why this happened to me and if this is happening to more people. And I would see different naturopaths and doctors and stuff, but I just felt like I was still getting Band-Aid approaches, whether it was herbs or medication or whatever, instead of exploring really the root cause and talking a little bit more about how the pill could have caused this and that it's quite normal too, because that information was kept a little bit more hush hush. And so anyway, fast forward to about 3 years ago, and I wanted to teach women this and be a coach in this way and be able to educate women on how to prevent this, or how to, if you are taking hormonal birth control and not feeling good about it and still feeling side effects and stuff, or just hormone imbalance in general, I want to be someone who can be a coach to these women and help them through this because of my experience. And also in nursing, I've seen so many young women come through, especially I work in theater and gynecology surgery specifically, I've done a lot of work in, and I see a lot of young women coming in and having horrible period pain or endometriosis or PCOS. And I think it's not directly linked to hormone birth control, but I think a lot of women wouldn't struggle as much if there was more education around how to keep our bodies balanced, and the other ways that you can have a contraception in your life without taking birth control. Yeah. So that's kind of propelled me the direction I'm going now.
Beautiful. Yeah, 100%. I mean, it is becoming more evident now, and people are becoming more educated, and we know that the hormonal birth control doesn't stabilize your hormones because it actually cuts off the communication from your brain to your ovaries to ovulate, and so therefore you're not making your own natural hormones. The pill provides synthetic hormones, which are not your natural hormones, so it's not balancing your natural hormones. I guess the one way like that it has been used, like when we're talking about endometriosis, is some women are put on the birth control to specifically stop hormonal production, in more so estrogen, because endometriosis isn't a condition, a hormonal condition as such, but it is exacerbated from hormones. So estrogen dominance, high estrogen levels, can help facilitate the growth of the endometriosis. So I think that is one of the reasons that doctors are putting women with endo on the hormonal birth control to try to stop and slow down that process. Otherwise, the other treatment is surgery. We can definitely help like manage the symptoms and anti-inflammatory diet and look at all of the things that go into endo, but that's sort of one of the reasons they do use it for endometriosis, just for people listening out there who may have been put on the birth control pill for endo. That's sort of like the reason for that. But yeah, I think it is really important to note that everyone's story, the way that they react with hormonal birth control, is very, very personal. And like you said, you know, the rebound effect of coming off the pill is so different for so many people. And one of those effects for you is that a rebound effect of the pill can be increasing sebum production, which the sebum in the skin, which then can cause different things like acne. And that is all part of that re-establishing the hormones. And sometimes we don't give it long enough because we get these sort of breakouts where the body's trying to find that homeostasis and balance. And then we get thrown back onto these Band-Aid solutions, as you said, to deal with what we're already dealing with. So yeah, it can be like this loop. So well done for like getting through that and getting past that, because you know, as a young woman as well, like the acne can be really like upsetting for people.
So confidence is huge at that age especially, and it can really affect your confidence. And I guess one thing I do want to add, just to clarify, is I am fully in agreement with you around that everyone reacts really differently. And I'm by no means against hormonal birth control. I was just sharing my story, but I think the thing that is missing in this whole picture is the education around what birth control does and the other options that could also be really helpful, and incorporating the holistic things like diet and movement and maybe some supplementation. I think we need that as well. We need that option, the Western conventional option with the hormones, but also if we're all given our options, at least we can make that choice ourselves and feel empowered to be like, this is the best option for me in my situation with my circumstances, which with my financial situation as well, because that can be huge when it comes to what way a person goes in their recovery. And so, yeah, I'm not here to bash the hormone option. I just, I really want to see in the future every option given to women so everyone can make the correct choice for them, and given all of the information around side effects and stuff as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. The work you're doing is amazing because it is all about that informed consent. And even like from an Ayurvedic perspective, like we as women, we're meant to menstruate. It's actually a really cleansing effect for the body. And I'm not sure if, I know a lot of my listeners would know about the Ayurvedic doshas. They build up in the body throughout the season, the week, the days, and part of menstruating is clearing out the doshas, the energy systems of the body. But it's also very cleansing for the uterus because when we menstruate, the natural sort of chemicals that it requires and the hormones is a cleansing effect for the uterus. And we are cyclical beings, so it does help with our energetic system as well.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know a ton about Ayurveda. I know the basics like the doshas and stuff, but I love learning more and more about it. So that's so cool to hear the cleansing piece as well from your standpoint.
Yeah, beautiful. So I'm really excited to talk more about exercise and hormones because I get a lot of questions about this, like the best time to exercise, what type of exercise, how it affects your hormones and your cycle. And I do feel like there are 4 different camps of women when it comes to the topic of exercising for hormonal health. And the first camp would be women who exercise according to the different phases in their cycle. And then you've got women who exercise all year round and do not change the way that they exercise just because they're menstruating. And then we have women who don't exercise at all, let's face it, and some women who are utterly confused about when to exercise and what type of exercise they should be doing because of the amount of conflicting information out there. So first of all, what camp do you sit in?
Yeah, so I will say that I used to fit in the workout the same all year round, and it was usually at a higher intensity. But I have recently, within the last 5 or so years, realized that modifying based on my energy levels and how my hormone levels are in my cycle, the intensity I do, and maybe taking more of a rest or doing things at a slower pace leading towards my period have been really beneficial. And not just in my energy levels, but in even my skin, going back to my skin, because that's such a big thing for me when it comes to hormone health. I notice that when I'm working out extreme amounts for the whole cycle, I actually break out more. And we do see that a lot in a lot of women who are hitting the gym at a high intensity all the time. Is a lot of people I see, clients I see who do that, they do struggle with skin issues. And that's, again, just one symptom. But it is a telling sign that something is out of balance. And oftentimes it could be that we're just pushing ourselves too much in the way of fitness, because that's what we've been made to believe up until recently. So I would say, to answer your question clearly, I fit in the moving with my cycle and choosing movements that support where my hormones are at throughout my cycle.
Amazing. So we'll definitely get into the right type of exercise for the phases of the cycle, because I think that's really important to understand. But first of all, let's just start with the basic of why is it important to exercise for hormonal health?
Yeah, so movement in general, as many studies have shown, is beneficial for so many different parts of the body. So we're not even just talking sex hormones, we're talking insulin, blood sugar balance, and in the way of stress hormones, certain exercises can be really beneficial to decrease the amount of cortisol we have, especially if we're doing a lower intensity and we're looking at long-term results. And in the way of building muscle and stuff, that really helps bring balance to our testosterone and estrogen. That's a funny one because it can be very up or down. But in general, if we're keeping a really balanced regimen around exercise and we're not pushing ourselves too much all the time, and we're feeling good with the routine that we have, that's a telling sign that we are in balance with our hormones. And again, looking at it from a holistic point of view, movement touches on so many different processes at once. And that's how it brings balance to our hormones essentially. So again, looking at detoxification, which can help rid the body of excess estrogen, which a lot of us can have with the environment that we're in, xenoestrogens that we're consuming and all of those things. So the detoxification process, the digestion process, that movement helps increase. And when you're looking at blood sugar, also keeping that in balance, it really just helps everything work in a very homeostatic way.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, like with blood sugar, so insulin and cortisol, these two hormones, they can really affect and drive different hormonal imbalances. So they kind of sit up the top, and then they can not attack, that's not the proper word. They can affect our sex hormones. So our estrogen, our progesterone, our testosterone, DHEAs, all of those type of hormones can be really affected by these two. And so the exercise it can elevate cortisol, like the HIIT style exercise, high intensity exercise, but it can be a beneficial stress for people who are balanced hormonally. But otherwise, the other types of exercise are really, really important, as you mentioned, to balance the cortisol and blood sugar regulation, which is a really big thing, especially for women who do have conditions like PCOS. They do need to be more mindful about blood sugar regulation. So could you please explain what you believe are the best sort of or most beneficial exercises for hormonal health and why?
Yeah, so again, this is a very bio-individual question because everyone's so different. And one thing I guess I want to preface this with is there's no one size fits all. And if your hormones are within balance in general, like you're not really dealing with any sort of imbalance or symptoms around hormones, negative symptoms, I should say, then you are a lot more resilient when it comes to doing higher intensity more often, I would say. And so I do think there is a lot of benefit of slowing down slightly just before your period, because when our progesterone or when our hormones start to drop, so progesterone goes up and estrogen, obviously, when we're ovulating, and then they start to go down. And it's during this time that our metabolism gets higher and our body temperatures get higher and we actually burn more calories. And it's a lot easier. We basically become more sensitive to stress and to obviously heat and sweat and all of that. And so we can feel a lot more fatigued if we're still doing the exercises that we were doing the first half of our cycle at the same intensity. We can start to feel more fatigued and then start to feel like, oh, this is really hard. What's wrong with me? And start to be down on ourselves. And so it is good to acknowledge those things and become body aware and be like, okay, maybe I should allow myself to just slow down a little bit more during this phase of my cycle. But that isn't to say that if you're not feeling those things, you can't push yourself a little bit harder. So I think my answer to this question is be very body aware and use the cycle syncing method to help give you the information of what's working and what's not working, but it's not a rule, a hard set rule. And so the most important thing I think for women is to start tracking your cycle, start to get to know where you're at and play around with it and see what works best for you. What works best for me is, again, slowing down a little bit before my period. And I do find that with most women that is helpful, and just even having that permission to be a little bit more gentle on your body is super good for emotional and mental health as well.
Amazing. I totally agree with you that it is very bio-individual, 100%. And also, like, we will now go into the menstrual cycle and what type of exercise is best for each phase. But as you pointed out, if you're feeling okay in that phase, it's okay to also do the type of exercise that you enjoy or would like to do. Like, it's not a strict rule for everyone, but it is to be very aware of. And it always does come back to that body awareness and not trying to push through just because that was your HIIT day or your leg day or whatever that might be. So taking into consideration the women's menstrual cycle, what type of exercise is considered best for each phase of the cycle?
Yeah, so I like to see the menstrual cycle as like when you're actually menstruating, having your period, that as the first phase of your cycle. And that is a great time to just more turn inwards. And so do things that are a bit slower. So walking, yin yoga, even normal yoga, if it's not maybe hot or power yoga, can be fine. And again, going back to there's no hard set rules. If you're feeling great during your period and you want to take your walk up to a slower jog, then that's fine too. But yeah, slower movements, especially at the first few days of your cycle when your bleeding's a bit heavier, or of your menstrual cycle. And then as you get to the end of your bleed, you will probably start to notice, if your hormones are quite balanced, that your energy starts to increase. And so as we migrate into the follicular phase, which is the second phase of your cycle, yeah, your energy will be a lot better. And that's as your estrogen goes up, and you might feel good doing the HIIT workouts and the running and the kickboxing, or all the higher intensity things during this time. Your body is quite resilient at this time to be able to do those things. And you do have a lower body temperature too. So you'll notice you're a lot more resilient in the way of not fatiguing as fast, as I said before, with the second half of your cycle, which we'll get into. So that is a great time to try and kick some goals, maybe ramp up your training a little bit, and going into the ovulation phase as well. So that's, you can break them up into 1 week cycles or 1 week phases, but again, everyone's cycle length is different. So I don't like to go by days, but your third phase is the ovulatory phase. And you will also probably be feeling your best in this time. So continuing on with the higher intensity stuff, your follicular and ovulatory phase, you can kind of do around the same things throughout there. And then as you go into your luteal phase, your phase before your period, that's when a lot of us start to notice we get more fatigued. And that's, like I said before, when our metabolism goes up and our temperatures go up. So we sweat a lot easier and all of that. And with our energies dipping, that is time to start to slow down. So we don't have to slow down totally, but especially in the first few days, you can kind of keep up with your strength training or the higher intensity. But as you get into the later part of the luteal phase leading into your menstrual cycle, I would really try and slow it down, especially if you are really sensitive hormonally and you are noticing some imbalances. It is quite beneficial to really listen to your body's energy cues and yeah, maybe do some light jogging, some Pilates, some yoga. And then, like I said, going into the menstrual cycle, continuing with those things for the first few days as well. So essentially think higher intensity the first half of the cycle, and moving into the more yoga, walking, Pilates, lower intensity exercises in the second phase. And again, if you wake up one day in the second phase and you're feeling super energized, don't not do that higher intensity workout just because you're like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. I think going back to that question of all the camps that women can be in, it can be so confusing when there's all this information out there. But the recent research is showing benefits to modifying your exercise slightly throughout cycles. And so that is something, especially if you have hormonal imbalances, that could really help bring you into balance.
Yes, I totally agree. And even from like the Ayurvedic perspective, specifically when you do start the bleed, so the first couple of days of menstruation, that is it's a vata provoking, so vata time of your cycle, and we need to really nourish the apana vayu, which is the downward motion, obviously, because we're menstruating down and out. And so any sort of high intensity or a lot of running or jarring motions, that will aggravate the vata in the body and can create some more of that sort of imbalance with the central nervous system, because vata really governs that central nervous system. So yeah, I 100% agree with what you've just said. And I think that the biggest take home is what we're both sort of saying is create that body awareness and really start to learn more about your cycle and how you feel in your cycle, because some women feel like on fire when they're ovulating, like they feel sexy and amazing and energetic, and they're like, boom, yeah, like this is me. And some women, like, they get bloated and ovulation can cause pain, and they obviously have like some sort of hormonal imbalances going on as well, to create some of these symptoms. But they could be mild imbalances, and it could just be that you have some ovulation pains that just are irritating you in different positions as well, like depending on the exercise you're doing. So yeah, really listening to where you are in the cycle and figuring out what that means for you and your body, and how different exercises make you feel in those different phases of your cycle.
Yeah, I love that so much. And acknowledging that when you are ovulating, yeah, some women might not be feeling at their peak because of their hormone imbalances. I think the main thing to, I guess, take away from that whole topic is that if you know how a normal hormone cycle should feel energy wise, and the ebbs and flows of what, I guess I shouldn't say normal, but an optimal hormone cycle should be, then you can kind of take a step back. And if you are ovulating and feeling really painful and maybe not feeling as confident as your friend feels during that time, then that is a telling sign that, okay, maybe something is out of balance and I should explore this more. But to not feel bad and not attach negatively to that, but use it as a learning tool and learning, and maybe ask the question of, what do I need to do to get more into balance, so that maybe next cycle, because it doesn't actually take a long time sometimes to just bring your body back into balance. It could be such a little thing. And for your next cycle, you might feel again that you're not having pain during ovulation, and you're feeling more confident. And I think it's really cool that we have this monthly tool that can tell us so much about our health and how balanced we are. And we should use that to our advantage. And it's not about feeling bad, like I said, if you're not feeling as optimal as you should be in certain phases.
Absolutely. And so what about women who are on the contraceptive pill, so they're effectively not cycling? Do you have any information or tips for them with their exercise?
Yeah, so currently there's not a ton of literature in the way of how hormonal birth control impacts physical activity. But what I will say, and I like how Elisa Vitti puts this, in that you're in your desert phase when you're taking the pill. So you're kind of just at one similar phase the whole time, and your hormones are quite low, and obviously you're not ovulating and all of that. And so some people can see that as a good thing, because it's like, okay, well, I won't have those energy drops, and I won't have maybe some of the symptoms that come with that fatigue and stuff. But at the same time, you have to remember, you don't get the benefits of having the really good energy highs and the really confident boosting hormones going on. So there's kind of give and take when you think of it as that flat line, I guess you could say. And again, it comes to just doing what feels right for you. But I will say you are a lot more resilient in being able to do higher intensity throughout the 4 phases of your cycle, because you don't get those big shifts in your cycle. However, I don't necessarily think that's something that's a maintainable habit to be doing. I think we're all cyclical and seasonal beings, no matter what we're taking. And so a lot of women, actually, I know, who are on the hormonal birth control, if they're not getting a period, they use the moon, and they use that as cycling throughout the month, so that they can kind of get in tune with their body that way, because they're not having the same connection with their cycle in a physical way, I guess.
Yeah. And that is a beautiful way. And I've often suggested that to clients, because it also allows them to have rest periods. So not just like being like a workhorse. But I think I just had like a thought when we were talking about women on the contraceptive pill and exercising. I guess it's important to note that the contraceptive pill can strip you of a lot of your essential vitamins and minerals, such as like your vitamin Bs, which are really important for energy production, and also bone strength. Like, we need our natural estrogen to help build our healthy bones. So if you are doing a lot of high intensity exercise, you're on the birth control pill, you really do need to look super closely to your nutrition to make sure that you are getting the right vitamins and minerals, because the contraceptive pill is going to strip that from you, and then that can hinder your energy levels, your thyroid hormone production, and other hormones that aren't governed by your ovaries. And also, as I mentioned, estrogen is really important for building bone strength. So doing sort of body weight exercises that are helping to facilitate that bone strength, because you don't have your hormones coming into play for you there. That
Yes.
helping women who are not on the birth control pill and have that natural estrogen to help that.
Yeah, 100%. And that is something that, again, when you're given the pill, should be explained to you, like watch out for these things so that you can experience taking the pill the best way you possible for your body and support your body through that.
Yeah, because estrogen and progesterone, they're so important for our cardiac, our heart health, as I mentioned, bone health, our brain health, like so much more than we actually give it credit for, or a lot of people understand that they are beneficial for. So definitely. And what about exercising for menopausal women?
Yeah, so going back to how, I mean, as you kind of talked about with estrogen and bone health and all of that, it's because our hormones are diminishing as we're going through menopause. It is really important to start focusing, especially on that strength training and resistance training to keep your bone density strong, because estrogen is so important for that specifically as well. And your testosterone as well, keeping that going. A lot of women might not think that's good for them because it's more of a masculine hormone, but we do need it as well in certain doses. And again, women in general, it doesn't matter people in general, it doesn't matter where you are in your life. Movement is good for so many things other than just keeping our hormones in check. And so I think continuing, but focusing mostly on the resistance training at least a couple times a week in that part of your life is so important to keep you strong into your later years as well.
Absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned, exercise is important, not just for hormonal health, but what I love about exercise and the way you move your body is it helps to stimulate the lymphatic system. And we know that the lymphatic system, it helps with our immunity and our detoxification pathways. So if we're not exercising, we can get a sluggish lymphatic system and our immune system can go down. We can get more fluid retention going on and all of those annoying things that happen with lymphatic
system. I think a huge part or a huge problem I think a lot of women are having now, you see, is estrogen dominance. A lot of these like PMS symptoms or heavy periods or anxiety, acne, a lot of that is related to estrogen dominance. And that might not mean that you have too much estrogen, but even too little progesterone. So it's just that ratio slightly off, making your estrogen a little bit too much in the body. And like you said, exercise is so good at getting the lymphatic system moving and your digestion moving and that whole detoxification process, which helps to rid the body of excess estrogen. And so that's so huge as well when it comes to how beneficial it can be for rebalancing hormones.
Absolutely. And we've mentioned HIIT training a few times, so high intensity interval training. So for those women who are listening or watching and are unfamiliar with that term, could you explain a little bit more about what HIIT training is and how that can affect hormonal balance?
Yeah, so HIIT training is usually when you're doing bursts of really high intensity exercises. So think like box jumps or burpees or anything where you're getting your heart rate up really high and then having little bouts of rest to balance that out, I guess. So you're working out really hard, resting, working out really hard. And it's basically something that just gets your heart rate up really high. And a lot of people up until recently have been told this is the way to lose weight, this is the way to get healthy, this is what we should be doing all the time. And it's really good to see that that is changing, especially around women, because we're starting to see that, especially with my personal experience. I used to be a long distance runner, which is high intensity all the time in my training. And I actually started to notice that the benefits were reversing. So I was starting to hold on to water weight. And even though I was doing all this high intensity training that I was told was going to help me get my leanest and best body, it actually, as a woman, was not serving me over the long period of time. I think, like we talked about, it can have a really good, can be really beneficial during certain parts of our cycle. But it does increase cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone. And that can be good in small bursts. But it's proven that if you continue to do that for a long period of time and you have chronic high cortisol levels, then your adrenals are just going to be shot. And that just can cause us to be fatigued, and our estrogen can get so out of whack as well. It can cause our appetite to increase. And so it's something that we have to be really mindful of. Too much of a good thing is not always a good thing. And so that's another reason why using our cycle to dictate what kind of movements we do when, and working with our body can give us that break from HIIT training if we slow down for the second half of our cycle, and then use it to our advantage when we do have higher energy levels to be able to do it, so that we have that break from it and we're not constantly just doing HIIT, because it's not necessary to get to our goals, and it's actually proving to be to lead us away from our goals if we are doing it too much.
Exactly. And an important point to make there about the adrenals, the effect, like the adrenals help to regulate our water metabolism, so our electrolyte balance. So if they, a sign of, adrenal LHPA axis dysregulation, adrenal fatigue, is when you are retaining a lot of that fluid and water weight, because your electrolytes are out of balance, out of whack, because of the intense pressure you're putting on the adrenals to either produce too much or too little cortisol, not having the right balanced amount. So absolutely. And then we have the women on the other end of the spectrum who are doing no exercise at all. And we know that a healthy amount of exercise, we've just mentioned, is important for so many different health facets. But some of the women who are not exercising, they just don't know where to start. It could be a confidence thing. It could just be like, I don't know what to do. Do you have any tips for them about starting exercise, where they can start so they can really help to optimally balance their hormones and health?
Yeah, so I think that we, again, have been fed all this information that we need to go hard and go long. And so I guess I really want to make it clear that you do not need to do that to get to your health goals. And in fact, a lot of times starting small and doing something consistently, as we know that consistency piece is huge, is more beneficial than killing yourself every day of the week or the month. And so I always say to my clients, just start with something you enjoy. And it doesn't have to be anything high intensity. You're still going to get so many benefits from it. So take that whole limiting belief around high intensity away. Let's just start with even a walk, or maybe it's swimming, or a sport, a team sport. So I would just say, do something that you love to start you off, to get you into the habit of exercising and moving your body on a maintainable basis, and then go from there. And that's probably the most simple but effective advice I give people.
Awesome. And so what does your exercise regime look like?
Yeah, so going back to how I do try and work with the phases of my cycle, I do try and focus mostly on higher intensity in the first half, and then the second half, usually for the beginning of it, I will continue to do some higher intensity and some strength training and a bit of running. But I love my walks. Like, I do that through every phase of my cycle. I love walking so much. But I do really allow myself to relax around my period, or just leading up to my period. And I think more than anything else, just having that permission and having the understanding that this is okay has been just so beneficial for me, and decreased the cortisol in my body, because I would always feel so much guilt and stress around not pushing my body, even if I didn't feel like it during the later phases. And now just knowing, okay, it's okay to just slow down, and it's actually more beneficial for me and getting me closer to my balance and health goals by slowing down, that has made such a difference for me. So I definitely am a fan of tracking, even if it's just to give yourself the permission to move in different ways in different parts of your cycle.
Beautiful. And even from the adaptation point of view, from like a like personal training sort of exercise point of view, you need to have rest periods in between your training schedule so that your body can adapt, it can build more strength. And then when you do have the energy, and when you are doing like more high intensity exercise, you can push that little bit to get further gains, but only if you are resting in between. So I think that is really important to know. And I'm 100% agree. Like I was always someone who was like, just like train, no matter what part of the cycle you were in. And it created so much havoc with my hormones. Like hit adrenal fatigue multiple times, but even then push through. And it's just with like, I think a bit of age and wisdom, you really start to learn the benefits and the not so good things about it. And it can work out what works for you. And I'm definitely an advocate for understanding your cycle, listening to your body, and adapting your exercise according to your cycle and how you feel on that day. But also not letting it, like, not using it as an excuse to do nothing 100%. For the whole month.
I love that you mentioned that. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And to wrap it up, I would love for you to leave our listeners with a few tips or takeaways that you would love to share, maybe 3 tips or takeaways to exercise for optimal hormonal health.
Yeah, so I think the first one is start tracking, whether you are, if you're on the pill, maybe using the moon, but you can still track your energy, and maybe you will notice a common theme throughout each month, even though you are on the pill. But just start to learn your cycle. I think that's huge. And then play around with doing different types of movements in different parts of your cycle and see how you feel. You could feel so much more energized through the whole part of your cycle. You might have way less PMS in the second half. I noticed when I started to slow down, my premenstrual symptoms went away. And I thought, this is crazy, because I thought working out every day really hard was the picture of health, but actually slowing down really made me more balanced. And so, definitely getting to know your cycle and playing around with movements and seeing what works best for you. I think, secondly, if you are feeling great during the later part of your cycle, not using it as like a hard rule to have to slow down. So again, really coming back to body awareness instead of trying to follow these hard set rules of I can't work out too hard in this part, or I have to work out harder in this part. And really knowing that this is a tool to use, but using your body's reactions and going with what feels good. And I guess the last thing would be that professional athletes are hitting PBs during their period. And so don't feel bad if your running race falls in the middle of your period, and don't feel hopeless that you have to run during your period and that you're not going to excel like the way you want to. You can definitely still do really well. I think the more important thing is to incorporate those rest periods into your training. So if you're training in a way that factors in the phases of your cycle and you're creating that balance in your training, you can have your race whatever day of your cycle it happens to happen on, and still do really well, because cycle syncing and using the phases has given you the amount of rest you need to keep your body in the most balanced state. So that's what I would say, is don't feel like bad or like you can't excel if you do happen to have an event that falls in the middle of your cycle, your menstrual cycle.
Absolutely. And I also think that's where proper sports nutrition comes into place as well, that you're really nourished properly, or if you are a competitive athlete and it does fall on your period, because you can't stop that, right?
Totally. Yeah. You can't pick the day.
Pick the day. So if it happens, that's cool. And like you said, lots of PBs have been done on the period. But it's just that's where you really have to look at the nutrition to support your physical expenditure.
Yeah. And I mean, we haven't, obviously, the topic isn't nutrition today, but it's just something to note that the second half of your cycle, like I said, your metabolism is higher. And so if you are going to continue to do higher intensity, you will notice you might have to eat more to be as energized, because we will need that extra support with our metabolism increasing from nutrition to keep us feeling as good during those exercises.
Yeah, exactly. Your calorie requirement is higher. Higher if you're active. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me. Can you share where the listeners can find you, what you've got going on?
So I am on Instagram. I don't do anything else really. Maybe that's the millennial in me. TikTok just seems too far-fetched.
I agree.
So I'm at Sincerely Eden on Instagram, and I am actually going away, so I'm not doing anything in the immediate future, but I do, like you said at the beginning, host workshops online, and we'll be doing more in person if you're local to the Gold Coast in Australia. And then I also take clients into my program, which I'll be starting up again when I get back in a month.
Yay! Where are you going?
I'm going back home to Canada.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Have an amazing time. And thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us. Really appreciated having you here.
Thank you so much, Harmony.
You're welcome. Namaste.
Namaste. Bye.